Welcome back. And it's not often you associate British hard rock and heavy metal with the royal family, but with the passing of Black Sabbath legend Ozzy Osbourne, the Coldstream Guards gave a nod to the old master in their own style. Joining me now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, obviously the passing of Ozzy Osbourne made international headlines. I actually think it's really great to see the King's Household Regiment mark the occasion. They're worlds apart, but I feel like it's one of those great relatability pieces that the royal family does so well.
Yes, I think the royal family for millennia has realized that one of the ways to stay relevant is to stay relevant and to know what's most people can identify with. I remember a few years ago when the royal family entertained the president of South Korea and gave awards. They invited Blackpink, which is a massive K-pop group, and I was quite surprised by that because at the time I was thinking, wow, does the royal family actually know who Blackpink was? They probably don't listen to K-pop or their music, but it's the point that staying relevant and knowing what's popular and knowing what normal people relate to is what people identify with the royal family. It's not just having sort of this distant monarchy that people don't really connect with. And that was actually, unfortunately, the downfall of many European royal families. The fact that for many centuries, people didn't actually see them. They couldn't even identify physically what the royal houses looked like. But thankfully, the royal family learned that lesson really prior to World War I and realized that that was actually one of the things that would sustain them. And it's carried through to this day. They played Paranoid by Black Sabbath upon the passing of Ozzy Osbourne. And I know this as someone who has worked with Sharon Osbourne before. It was a terrible blow and it was such a huge loss, and the family are really devastated and reeling. And most of the country is as well. I mean, this is probably the finest thing to come out of Birmingham in ever. So for the royal family to pay tribute to that was really, I mean, this is probably what they do best. Understanding the mood of the nation and really going through the country through the various phases of its life, of its history.
And speaking of the King and Queen being out and about, and they're still in Scotland, and they've had the week attending, obviously, the Highland Games. The photos and footage have been amazing. It's always a must in the calendar. What were the highlights for you?
Definitely the tug of war with those men wearing tartans. And kilts, they're tartan kilts, and you're just concerned that nothing blows in the wind and somehow makes it onto the front page of the Daily Mail. But, this has always been a staple in the King's calendar since he was made chieftain of the Games in 2002. The Games have been going on since 1970 to pay tribute to the then Queen Mother. So, the King is always at these Games, which are held in Caithness, when he's up in Scotland in the summer, and this is no different. I think probably the most iconic image when you think of the Highland Games is actually the tug of war of these really strong men with these very, very strong, thick quads, trying to see who will win, and the King always looking very amused. The King was also wearing his kilt, his kilt in the Balmoral tartan, which is obviously exclusive to the royal family, and only members of the royal family can actually wear it. So it's a big sense of British tradition that the King gladly maintains and keeps up.
Now, also this week, and we saw the new state portraits being hung in the throne room. We've got a video of it. Check this out.
Today, the two new state portraits are being hung in the throne room at Buckingham Palace. State portraits are typically grand, full-length portraits that become the defining image of the new monarch. The portrait of King Charles III was painted by Peter Kuhfeld, and Paul S. Benny completed the portrait of Queen Camilla. The King is shown in military dress, but wearing the red robe of state, which is worn at the beginning of the coronation ceremony. And you can see the imperial state crown set on a table to one side, just as we see in the portrait of George III. Queen Camilla wears her coronation dress, which was made by Bruce Oldfield, and it includes embroidered flowers representing the national flowers of Britain, but also her two rescue dogs, Bluebell and Belle.
Now, Esther, this might be the slightly less relatable side of the royal family, but a beautiful mark of tradition. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is being hung up in anticipation of sort of the new round of tours that Buckingham Palace does, which usually starts in the summer. I have a friend who's been on those tours. They're not cheap, but they're definitely worth every penny. And this is obviously marking the new monarch. This is actually one of the more flattering portraits I've seen of the king and queen, particularly of the king. I don't know if you remember a portrait from a couple of years ago where the background was all in red, and people were saying that the king, like basically he was a priest performing an exorcism. Thankfully, they went for something more traditional and more flattering, and you know, tourists will not be scared off basically by seeing the king coming out and sort of a sea of red behind him. And yes, it's the less relatable parts of it, but it is important. And when you've actually been on these tour experiences, you can see how it fits into the whole decor, and really gives you an understanding of the royal family and basically their place in British society.
Yeah, and they do look stunning, one has to admit, regardless of how relatable or not relatable they may be.